Hello, third graders. We are in week 3 of Tornado by Betsy Bears. We are on chapter 6. So last week we talked about the turtle and how he had it in his mouth and about the cat 530 and what happened with the cat. So now we're on to chapter 6 and it's called Buddy. Pete opened the cellar doors. We peered around him, but my mother turned her head away as if she didn't want to see. There was hail lying on the ground and broken limbs and leaves everywhere. Hail is like little balls of ice that fall when tornadoes happen. No real damage, Pete called to my mother in a tearful voice. My mother folded her hands over her heart. But I still don't like the look of that sky, Pete said. We better sit tight. He closed the door and he sat down. Do you remember anything else about Tornado? I prompted. I remember one time. This was the saddest day of my life. I hate to tell it. Please, I said. Well, my daddy and I went to town in the truck. Tornado was in the back. We hadn't planned on taking him, but as soon as my dad lowered the tailgate, he jumped in like he knew what he was doing, so he got in. My dad and I parked the truck on the side of the street and went to the hardware store. Tornado stayed behind in the truck. We were gone about an hour. When we came back, my dad was loaded down with things, and I was carrying some paper bags filled with different size nails. As we got closer to the truck, I heard a voice saying, it's Buddy, in an excited way. Mama, Papa, it's Buddy. Oh, Buddy, Buddy, I never thought I'd see you again. There was a family standing around the back of our truck, and one of the girls had climbed in. She had thrown her arms around Tornado's neck. She was the one saying all the buddies. I stopped where I was. To save my life, I couldn't have taken another step. The bags of nails fell from my hands onto the sidewalk. It was as if they had nailed me down. My daddy shifted his packages to a hand on his shoulder. He had warned me not to get too fond of the dog. He's not yours yet, he had always said, over and over again. But both my parents had asked around and nobody knew who he belonged to. Well, I had gotten very fond of him, more than fond. I loved that dog. He was mine, and now some girl was calling him Buddy? My dad held my shoulder tighter and said, What's going on? And to the short man in suspenders. Is this your truck? The man asked. Yes. This dog, the man said. He looked exactly like our dog Buddy, who got blown away in the August tornado. That's about when we found him, my dad says. He came with us. He was in our yard. I had to stop breathing. Everybody had, except the short man in the suspenders. My girl carried on something awful when she found that dog was gone. She always has been real fond of him. Her grandfather gave him to her. My boy's gotten very fond of the dog, too, said my dad. There was a long and terrible silence. Then the man in the suspenders said, Well, maybe I better go get the police or something to settle this. That won't be necessary, my dad said. You take the dog. He's rightfully yours. They let down the tailgate and took Tornado out the back of our truck. They loaded him into their truck. Tornado did not look really happy, but I couldn't do anything to stop what was happening. I was still nailed to the concrete. My dad put his packages in the truck and came back and picked up the nails for me. Let's go home, Petey said, using the name he always called me when I was little. Then he fell silent, even when my dad couldn't find the good in this. The truck was pulling away from the curb. Tornado was in the back. I tried to get one last look at my dog, but my eyes were so full of tears. If my dad had helped me into that truck, I'd be standing there to this day. Pete paused to wipe his eyes. That story always made him cry. It made me cry, too. I wiped my eyes on my arm and then wiped my arm onto my shirt. Go on, I urged. He took a deep breath to help himself continue. That day, that miserable Saturday, was the saddest, longest day of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do my chores without knowing I was doing them. I couldn't play cards after supper, and I couldn't sleep. There was an emptiness about my room that matched the one inside of me. The whole house seemed empty. The whole outdoors, the whole world seemed empty. I didn't go around exactly boo-hooing, but my eyes kept filling up with tears. As soon as I'd wipe one would flood down away, another one, and then another one would come. I felt like it would be like that for the rest of my life. Sunday passed in the same lonely way, then Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday, my mother got tired of what she called my moping, and she took me outside to talk some sense into me. You knew that you might lose that dog, she said. I nodded. You knew he wasn't yours. I nodded again. "You've got to stop moping around. You're going to make yourself sick." I nodded. I felt like I was sick already. "Listen, we can get another dog. There are other dogs in the county." I shook my head back and forth. Not for me. On Friday, I was in the barn and I heard a thumping sound. It was the sound of Tornado's tail that he used to make against the barn door when he wanted to come inside. My eyes flooded. I couldn't help it. I knew there was no thumping. It was just a sound I wanted to hear so bad that my ears heard it. There just wasn't any thumping. There couldn't be. But the thumping went on, and it was really thumping, and it was getting faster. I wiped my eyes and I looked, and Tornado was standing in the doorway. My Tornado was standing in the doorway. "Tornado's back!" I yelled. "Tornado, good boy, good boy!" I threw my arms around him. He curved his body the way he did when he was pleased about something, and his tail wagged in my face. My dad came to the door. "Tornado's back," I told him. "So I see." "We won't have to take him back to those people, do we?" I tightened my hold on Tornado's neck. "Well, I don't rightly know how we could," my dad said. "The man wasn't polite enough to give us his name." "That's true. And if they find us, well, the dog knows where we are. He can come over for a visit any time he takes his mind to." "Yes, but I want him to stay." "I do too," my dad said. "But if we have to share him with other folks, we'll have to do it. Half a tornado is better than no tornado." And my father and I laughed. There was a long pause in the cellar, and I asked, "Did he stay?" I liked a good ending. "For 7 happy years," Pete said. "And the people never came to get him?" "No, of course we didn't make a mistake of taking him to town again." Here's the picture of him standing in the barn door. Would that be so awesome? You miss the dog, and then he comes back to find you. Such a great. Pete stood up, took off his hat. Pete's the grandpa, remember? And put it back on his head, and he stretched. "I'm going to take another look around." But before he could open the doors, there was a loud knock. "Hello in there! Anybody home?" It was my father's voice. "The storm's over," he cried. We rushed out through the cellar doors and into the fresh air. My mom hugged my dad. "Oh, Link, I was so worried." As soon as my grandmother got up the steps, she hugged him too. Then she gave him a stern look and said, "Lincoln, I hope you had the good sense to get in the ditch." "Look at me, Mama. Can't you tell?" "Don't anybody else hug me. I'm too muddy to hug." My little brother hung back to speak to Pete. "Could Tornado really and truly do a card trick?" "He could." "And did you really and truly have a cat named 530? "We did." My older brother said, "I wish you had told that story about Tornado and the rooster. That's my favorite." "Next time," Pete promised, and then he winked at me. "If there is one." Because remember, they're still in the storm cellar because of a tornado. And that is the end of Tornado. Isn't that the sweetest book? I hope you enjoyed it, and I will find another book to read you for next week. Have a great week, and remember the library is open from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can come get a book anytime. I hope to see you guys there. Have a great week. Bye.